Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte.
Later in the show, we'll take a peek at global crisis through a fiction lens when we talk with Chuck Collins. He was the heir to the Oscar Mayer. He was heir to Oscar Mayer, not the Oscar Mayer, but yes, the Oscar Mayer, but abandoned that to pursue philanthropy, and we'll ask him all about what that entails too.
And hopefully we'll be joined later in the show by the legendary guitar player of the Saturday Night Live band, who's going to be giving a masterclass and a performance in Belchertown this weekend, G.E. Smith. But first,
to boldly go where no man has gone before.
some more kitchen table astronomy with Hampshire College astronomer Dr. Salman Hameed, Mr. Universe, at your kitchen table in Amherst. Couple quick things. One, you went to go see Hasan Minhaj at the Williamstown Theater Festival. We tried to get him on our show, and we will be talking about some other things Williamstown Theater is doing, which is great. But how was Hasan Minhaj?
It was great. Why? I mean, he should come to the show because there is now a South Asian connection. So I think
You can't play the South Asian card and get him on?
you should totally do that because you say you have a whole thing about South Asia. So come on in. So no, it was really wonderful. It was a small audience. I love Williamstown Theater Festival because there's so many cool stuff that happens. So this was part of that.
Comedian, of course. He was on The Daily Show. He had his own show. That was amazing. And we will have the Williamstown Theater Festival on later this week, so that's good. Another thing that's happening later this week, maybe, is a giant solar storm predicted for Thursday. Solar storms are what cause the northern lights to be seen, right?
Okay. So this is the bias that we have to correct. It's the northern and southern lights.
Okay, got it.
Okay, because we just go like, hey, who cares what's happening in the...
Aurora Borealis, does that cover it all?
That's exactly right. So Aurora Borealis, so that's when particles from the sun, like protons, for example, they get ejected, and people can tell if there is a lot of activity in the sun. So you can actually predict sometimes. And those charged particles, I mean, normally they don't come to the Earth because of our magnetic field. We are protected. But right around from the poles, they enter and then they interact with the atmosphere. And that's what produces these different colors. Those different colors represent the different types of atoms that are in our atmosphere. When there is a solar storm, you can actually see a lot more particles, and we can potentially see as south as here, but also down all the way down to New Mexico and Texas. I have seen them once in my life. I mean, I do want to go to Iceland or some other place. Field trip to Iceland, by the way.
Yeah,
Fab 1413 Iceland. I think.
Love it.
I'm sure Bjork would be happy.
I saw them once in Turner's Falls.
I saw them from downtown Northampton during Northampton Film Festival, way back when there used to be a Northampton Film Festival, and they were red in color, and it was like around 8:30 or 9. That's the one time I have seen. I would suggest there are some apps or some websites that track it, that can give you a little bit of warning, maybe, and try that. I mean, it's cool. I mean, it is really weird.
Yeah, and if you see weird green lights in the sky on Thursday or Friday, know that you're seeing the northern lights. When I saw them, I was like, what the hell is that?
And people think that it's clouds. It's like, because I remember during the film festival back in like in Northampton, I was showing people. I was like, look, these are northern lights. Like, no, these are clouds. I'm like, no, actually, do you see stars all around? It's like, oh yeah, okay. So yes, it will be just sort of like wisps of different colors.
Yeah. And maybe, just maybe, this Thursday, Friday, you could see it.
I hope so. And call into FOAP 413.
Yeah, if you see them, we definitely want to hear about it. Another thing that we won't see, but that astronomers have been seeing, that Einstein predicted over 100 years ago, are gravitational waves.
Right. So, I mean, this is an amazing story. So Einstein's general theory of relativity, one way of thinking about gravity is that it is the bending of space and time. So our universe is made up of 4 dimensions, 3 dimensions of space and 1 of time. And Einstein's theory suggested that if you have any object that has mass, would bend this space-time. And it is this bending that manifests itself. That's how we see it as gravity.
Now, you've explained this to me before in a way that has made it really concrete in my mind, where if you imagine space-time as a blanket, and you put a ping pong ball on the blanket, it's going to make a little dip in space-time. If you put a bowling ball on the blanket, it's going to make a massive dip in space-time. And that is how the fabric of space-time kind of works.
That's exactly right. When objects move in there, they create a little bit of ripples. A smaller object creates very little ripples. And so it was predicted that objects, especially that are big, they can lose energy that can be detectable as waves in space-time.
Like if you dropped a bowling ball in the blanket, it would make a ripple along the blanket, and we would be able to maybe perceive that ripple in the blanket.
There is a UMass connection, and there was a Nobel Prize that was given in 1993 to two physicists, Taylor and Hulse. Taylor was a professor here at UMass and his graduate student. By the time they got the Nobel Prize, they were at Princeton, so it always writes down like, Princeton, but hey, come on!
Started at UMass Amherst.
And also they used Arecibo Observatory for their observations.
Which is the UMass Connecticut Observatory, right?
This is the one in Puerto Rico. Rest in peace. It's no longer functioning. But what they discovered, they found these dead stars called neutron stars. They can also be pulsing, and so they're called pulsars, but it's a similar thing. What they discovered in there was that their orbit was slightly decaying. If you think in terms of Newton's laws, well, two objects are in motion, orbiting each other, and they should be orbiting forever. But not if they are losing some energy, which was shown. But how are they losing it? Where is that energy going? As gravitational waves. So it was their prediction that, sure enough, and that's why they got the Nobel Prize, they could actually show the orbits decay, but they did not see gravitational waves directly. And then in 2015, that's where people remember big results from LIGO Observatory, which was designed to detect gravitational waves, a couple of kilometers wide, and there are these very finely tuned lasers in there, and they can detect very tiny variations. And of course, it's very, very hard to do, because you have to take out all other kinds of interference and want to make sure that this was through gravitational waves. And they detected for the first time gravitational waves, which could be pointed to colliding black holes. When they collide, so you can imagine these very dense objects.
Two bowling balls.
And when they're colliding, they are just producing this intense energy, which is going out in gravitational waves, and this is what we detected. So it was a stunning confirmation of general theory of relativity, predicted by, again, from Einstein's theory. But just last week, or a couple of weeks ago, a new announcement came up, and that was about the fact that astronomers have found gravitational waves from a different method. This is a different way of detecting gravitational waves, but also different types of gravitational waves. They call it the background hum of gravitational waves. What astronomers expected, again, as we said, all kinds of objects, when they move, they should emit gravitational waves. But the waves could have different frequency. Just like you have light or sound waves that have different frequencies. Okay, so in the same way, you can have gravitational waves that can have short frequency. That's the kind that was detected by LIGO, or really long frequency gravitational waves. It's just where the peaks and crests are of a wave. But you would need a much bigger detector. So if it is on the scale of kilometers, LIGO would detect it. That's what it detected in terms of for the black hole collisions. But astronomers were like, but you can have these supermassive black holes. We know that supermassive black holes exist in almost every large galaxy. Like the Milky Way, there are supermassive black holes at the centers of galaxies that are much bigger, and we know galaxies collide. What kind of gravitational waves they would be producing, and it was expected that they would produce it on a much longer wavelength or lower frequency. That's what they would have, a background hum. The problem was you needed a detector that is much bigger than LIGO. In fact, you needed a detector on the scale of tens or hundreds of light years. And so astronomers found a way to create that.
How?
That's where it gets really interesting, because there are these millisecond pulsars. These are, again, dead stars, but they're spinning really fast. And because they have high magnetic fields, they also send these pulses. Some of them can go over 100 times in a second. Here is a second. And these objects that are about the size of New York City have gone around about 100 times or more. So they are actually really good for measuring time. And in fact, they are the best timekeepers that are natural. And for a while, we actually humans here on Earth, used these millisecond pulsars as timers. So what astronomers did, and there are multiple arrays. In the US also, there is one pulsar timing array. But there are also in Europe, in India, in Australia, and in China. They were all had these different pulsar timing array, and they looked at these pulsars. So the US one looked at about 68 millisecond pulsars distributed over a few thousand light years across in the Milky Way galaxy. And then they looked at it over for 15 years. If their times with respect to each other have changed a little. And because they're very accurate, right? So they are they are going in milliseconds, sort of like, in terms of their pulses. And if there is a slight change, and because they are distributed across the galaxy, you can actually predict if a gravitational wave, if this disturbance in space-time has gone through, you can predict how each of the pulses from these different pulsars, of this array of pulsars, 68 pulsars, would change. So it's not just a change between one, it's the change across these 68 pulsars.
Looking at a stadium, you see the wave happening over one part of the stadium, the wave comes all the way around, and they use those 68 pulsars to see these gravitational waves, and found out what? That they're kind of constant? That they're there all the time?
There is this kind of waves that is a background hum. So the example that one of the astronomers used, and I really liked it, that this is kind of like a background chorus. But then the ones that LIGO detected, which are much higher frequency, it's like a sort of like, a chirp. So, thank you for my vocals here.
Soon, with last week having the hottest recorded temperatures on Earth on record in human history, we'll talk about a work of fiction about very real existing dreads in the not too much distant future that ask us how we as humans should respond. We'll chat with Chuck Collins about his life and new novel.
But, fingers crossed, up next, guitar legend G.E. Smith, seminal sideman and band leader of Saturday Night Live, comes to Belchertown this weekend. He'll be on the show shortly. You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on NEPM. Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. I'm Monty Belmonte.
And I'm Clee Smith.
We're joined by Chuck Collins, who is the director of the program on inequality and the common good at the Institute for Policy Studies, where he co-edits inequality.org. His most recent book, up until now, was The Wealth Hoarders, How Billionaires Pay Millions to Hide Trillions.
He's also the author of the popular book, Born on Third Base, a one-percenter makes the case for tackling inequality, bringing wealth home, and committing to the common good with Chelsea Green, and with Bill Gates Sr., Wealth in Our Commonwealth, a case for taxing inherited fortunes.
Chuck Collins is now trying his hand at fiction with his new book, Altar to an Erupting Sun. Chuck will be at the Odyssey Bookshop in South Hadley tomorrow, July 10th at 7 p.m. Thank you so much for joining us, Chuck.
Great to be with you, Khalees and Monty. I love Fabulous 413.
We love you.
Thanks.
It's not even raining in Springfield, where I came from. It was like, I had my raft. It was a choppy ride down the Connecticut, let me tell you.
You're where now? In Guilford, Vermont?
Yes.
Yeah, so right outside the Fabulous 413. But we'll make this exception.
Yes.
Because
Thank
this
you.
book has an awful lot to do with the Fabulous 413. Mm-hmm. And if that was not a teaser enough, we're going to hear more about how this book deals with real issues that real people in our actual history have dealt with in the Fabulous 413, but in a slightly historical fiction setting, and then projects at least a decade into the future where we will hear about what we might want to do when it comes to climate crisis. But Chuck has been so kind as to join us as we speak with guitar legend who is coming to Belchertown this weekend. Many of us know him from the 10 years he spent on Saturday Night Live.
Oh, no, don't do this to me.
He played with Bob Dylan, with Roger Waters, with Hall & Oates, David Bowie, Buddy Guy, George Harrison, Chad Smith, so many more, in addition to leading Saturday Night Live for a decade. We accidentally gave him the wrong phone number because we moved into a new studio, but please welcome to the Fabulous 413, the legendary G.E. Smith. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, I'm really happy to be here, and I'm sorry I was late.
Oh, no
It's not
worries.
your fault, G.E. We gave you the
We
wrong
gave you
phone
the
number.
wrong number.
Yeah, we don't
happened.
we don't do a lot of phone interviews live like this, but we're so glad that you're doing this.
Yes.
With us and with Belchertown Music Boosters.
Indeed.
They're a volunteer organization that supports band, choir, and music programs. And Saturday, you'll be doing an intimate solo performance And then on Sunday, a masterclass of the history of guitar in America. That sounds
I'm looking forward to all of it. And also, on top of it all, for me personally, I'm a huge Emily Dickinson fan. So I'm really thrilled to be coming to the area, and I'm hoping to get over to her house.
Oh, yeah. So now I heard about this, G.E. Smith. Is it true that you have Emily Dickinson guitar picks?
It is absolutely true.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yep.
Maybe they'll give you some other things that you can make more picks with while you're at
Who
her
knows?
house.
Or I hope that
Never guessed.
you should hide them all over Emily Dickinson's house, and it'll be like the G.E. Smith Emily Dickinson pick Easter egg hunt.
I'm definitely going to bring one with me if they want it.
Oh, I'm sure they would take it. I'm sure they'd love it.
And I'm sure most people know Emily Dickinson is from Amherst, Massachusetts, the legendary poet. What is it? What is it about Emily Dickinson that you love, G.E. Smith?
Well, to me, she invented American poetry. I know all scholars might not agree with me, but she was the first one to take all the, extra words out. Just little bang, short blast,
Mm-hmm.
And she went for hits, I think, just cut out all the nonsense and say what you want to say in as few words as possible. And I love her imagery, and I just think she was really a smart person, and I was always loved her, and I got all of her, poems, and I've read lots of books about her and stuff. She's the greatest.
As a fan, I'm sure you can set all Emily Dickinson's poems to the tune of Gilligan's Island. Have you been tempted to do that musically?
Never.
Okay.
No.
There's another song that it works with, too.
I can't remember what it is, but NEPM's own Jill Kaufman did a whole big story about it a couple months ago. What's your connection? What's your connection to Belchertown, G.E. Smith? What's bringing you to Belchertown, Mass?
I guess it's right next door, right?
Yeah, it's pretty close.
Yeah. So I like doing things with students and getting to talk to them and see why do they play music and what do they love about music. I've always found that really fascinating, and because I started when I was a little kid, so it's all I've ever known. So I love to talk to people about it.
Aw, that's wonderful. I have a question about guitars because I
Sure.
also play guitar. You're known for playing a Telecaster, but why the Telecaster out of all of the models that you play? Like, I've seen you play a Gibson Dot and a National and Strats every once in a while, but why what makes the Telecaster special?
When I was 11, my mom took me shopping for an electric guitar because I had a chance to make some money. Before that, I just played acoustic. And we went and looked around in Pennsylvania, where I come from, a very small town, probably a place like Belchertown, I'm sure. We looked around, and what we found was a Gibson, nice Gibson electric, a used one, and a used Fender Telecaster. The Gibson was $200. The Telecaster was $100. So we got the Telecaster. There was no question which one we were going to get.
Yeah.
Right.
And I still have the book where she paid it off $15 a month. And so that's why I play a Telecaster, because that was the first thing I got. And it always just worked for me. Maybe because I got it when I was just a kid, it just feels comfortable in my hands, and I love all the different sounds it can get.
Nice.
That's why I play one.
Right on.
As we mentioned before, a lot of people know you as the named head of the Saturday Night Live band, but the people that you've
Right.
worked with are incredible. Like your involvement with Bob Dylan and his endless tour, and his anniversary, and Roger Waters and Hall & Oates and these other names that we mentioned. But you also got to play with so many incredible people on Saturday Night Live. I just watched a clip of you earlier today jamming with Eddie Van Halen, the sadly late great, which I heard tell he was there with Valerie Bertinelli and was just bored, and they brought him, and you just got to jam on. Is that true?
Well, yeah, she was hosting the show. They were married at the time, and he was just kind of hanging out, and obviously I wanted to talk to him and meet him as a guitar player. And I have great respect for his playing. He's a fantastic guitarist. And so he would come up in the office upstairs on the 17th floor in my office, in the music department, and hang out. And we just started, of course, playing, the two of us. And I said, man, why don't you sit in with the band and do something? And he was like, yeah, okay. Because then he wasn't just hanging out. Now he had a purpose. And we had a great time. He had something already in his mind about like how this would work, with a big band with horns and stuff. And then I added another section onto it, And we did it, and he played great like he always did, and we had a really good time.
Did folks playing with you ever get caught like kind of unawares in that way, like playing with like bigger band that they hadn't a sound they hadn't necessarily played with? Was anybody ever caught off guard when they came to play with the Saturday Night Live band?
Gee, that's a good question, but no, most people have if they've been playing for a while, playing the guitar for a while, they've listened to music with horns and stuff. So they have an idea about how to fit in. And generally, the people that I would invite, when I first started doing the show in 1985, the show was kind of in a little bit of a slump, and then it got real popular again. It goes back and forth. And by 88, it was doing really well. And I said to Lorne Michaels, the boss, the guy that created the show, I said, Lorne, when there's a good guitar player in town, can I invite him to sit in? And we won't tell anybody. We won't put it in TV Guide, but the camera will come up and there will be Buddy Guy or David Gilmour or Eddie Van Halen or, a lot of different people like that. And we did. And Johnny Winter did it. A lot of different people. And it was always, fun, and it was exciting. And then I would hear from guitar players in other bands and stuff like, wow, that was great, man. I turned on and there was Gilmour.
Wow fact.
Thing,
that's what a beauty of live TV and live radio. You think you might have G.E. Smith first, but you give him the wrong phone number, and then he's second on the show. We're speaking with G.E. Smith. Yeah, live. It's magic.
Live is a thing, yeah.
You used to do it without even delay in the early days there, I was told. G.E. Smith is going to be this Saturday playing an intimate show in Belchertown, and then a masterclass on the history of guitar on Sunday. Does that masterclass include instructions for these kids, or is it really just a breakdown of the history of the guitar, G.E.?
I'll be playing, and I'll certainly be talking about music and how to play music in a band. I've always loved being in bands, and I've been a musical director for a lot of different things. So, I got some notions about how to be in a band, so I'll talk to them about that. And, of course, anything that they want to talk about, I'll try to get them responding.
Have you taught these kind of classes to kids before? And what kind of guitar are they interested in now? Like when I was a kid, everybody's like, you got to learn Stairway to Heaven. It's mandatory, that kind of thing. What are they learning now?
Now, there's so much variety now because of the internet. I tell stories that in the old days, if I had to learn a song, well, it might take me a couple of months to find a recording of it, right? If I heard something on the radio in the car, and I go, oh, okay, what's that? It might take me months or a year to find it. And then I'd have to sit there with the record and, slow it down, turn the 33 down to 16 or the 45 down to 33 and on the old record players. And I'd learn it. Now, if I have to learn a song, I just go on YouTube, and there's a 14-year-old girl from Omaha playing it better than the person on the record and telling me exactly what to do.
Am I using that method to learn some songs for my November show? Maybe I am.
And I learned plumbing the same way.
It's great.
It is.
It is pretty great. However, I think a masterclass with G.E. Smith would also be pretty great. And that it's very affordable, and it goes to support the Belchertown Music Boosters, who are supporting chorus and band in the Belchertown public schools. The concert is this Saturday. The masterclass is this Sunday. They're both with G.E. Smith. You were on Saturday Night Live for 10 years. They were 10 great years, especially kind of the middle to latter half of your time there. You are the band leader that I think of when I think of Saturday Night Live. Apart from Eddie Van Halen, maybe, or Roger Waters, if you could relive one of those Saturday Night Live moments and wave a magic wand and be right back there, is there one that jumps to mind, G.E. Smith?
Wow, well, there were a bunch, but I got to play with Al Green twice, and I love that Memphis, R&B stuff, and Al Green, obviously one of the great singers of America, and so that was really great. And he gave me a nice compliment one night. He said, "Yeah, that's the sound. You're getting that real sound,"
I love
and that made me feel great.
As well it should.
Yeah, unbelievable. And what a legendary... Oh, go ahead.
I'm just an old bar band guy. I came up playing I'm a bar band guitar player, and I came up playing in bar bands. like a lot of the great guitarists. Stevie Ray Vaughan is kind of the ultimate bar band guitar player, you know? And so that, you know, that always meant a lot to me.
Yeah.
Well-
But people underestimate the power and necessity of sidemen, and you're one of the greater ones. So, like, yeah.
G.E. Smith performing this Saturday and Sunday. You can find out all the information about the Belchertown Boosters at belchertownmusic.org. A private and intimate concert on Saturday, and then a masterclass on the history of guitar on Sunday. We apologize for giving you the wrong phone number at the beginning, but we're so glad we got a chance to talk to you, G.E. Smith.
Thank you so much for doing it. I appreciate it, and I'm really looking forward to coming there.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for coming.
Coming up next, we'll talk to Chuck Collins about his new novel that is all too true, Altar to the Erupting Sun. He'll be at the Odyssey Bookshop in South Hadley tomorrow. You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on NEPM.
Tell me over and over and over.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. We're joined by Chuck Collins, who very patiently waited with us through that G.E. Smith conversation. It seems like you had a good time.
A pleasure. I got goosebumps hearing him talk about Al Green and
Oh,
the
yeah.
sit-in sessions, and maybe it's the air conditioning in the studio. But,
It's a little of both. They're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
it's a real goosebump.
Chuck Collins is the director of the program on inequality and the common good at the Institute for Policy Studies, where he co-edits inequality.org. He's written books like The Wealth Hoarders, How Billionaires Pay Millions to Hide Trillions. He also authored the popular book Born on Third Base, and the new book is a novel of sorts. You'll be at the Odyssey in South Hadley to talk about it tomorrow. It's called Altar to an Erupting Sun. How do you describe this? Because there's a lot of historical fiction that has to do with Western Massachusetts in this book, but yet it's still described as a novel. Chuck?
Well, it is a novel. It is a work of fiction, but it draws on real people that lived in 413, that lived in Western Mass, mostly Franklin County.
Some of which still live.
Some of which are still with us. Juanita Nelson, though, we're honoring her 100th birthday this summer. Sam Lovejoy, still living in Montague, toppled the tower that sort of launched the modern anti-nuclear power movement. I wanted to lift up, put them on the altar, if you will, some of these real stories that shaped our communities and shaped our social movements that really make a difference right now.
Altar creation is a really important plot point throughout the whole book. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that actually means to create an altar? Like, it shows up a bunch.
Yes. The main character, a fictional woman named Ray Kelleher, is an altar builder. She learned about altars from people who built altars in Vietnam and Central America, sort of altars of remembrance, honoring ancestors. In this case, for me, this book is an altar to real people, to social movements, but it's also sort of how do we spiritually prepare ourselves for a disrupted future. And my main character, Ray, would say, part of what we need to do is draw on our ancestors, draw on those who've come before us, who faced hardship before, as a way to face the future together.
In some ways, it's a greatest hits collection of all of the movements that a lot of people in the Valley were supporting. The Clamshell Alliance, that was very anti-nuclear. As you mentioned, Sam Lovejoy, who, if people aren't familiar with that story, is a character in the book, and his story is chronicled in the book and interwoven with one of the fictional characters. If people aren't familiar with that actual story, tell us a little bit about Sam Lovejoy and his story.
Well, first, part of my hope in this novel is people will want to learn more about those stories. So I've tried to tell the story of Sam, who there was a plan to build a nuclear power plant right on the plains of Montague. It was going to suck up all the water out of the Connecticut River. It was a really bad idea. And Sam, as part of trying to stop it and trying to be part of an organizing effort, actually did an act of civil disobedience, property destruction, you could say. He clipped a cable that held up a weather tower that was kind of pre-power plant. They had a weather tower to kind of monitor where the nuclear radiation would go if they had an accident or something. Anyway, then he turned himself in. He was charged with destruction of property. He went to court. Howard Zinn came and testified as a historian about why civil disobedience matters, others experts, and he was eventually acquitted on a technicality. But it's a really important story because it sort of launched the modern anti-nuclear power movement in 1973-74.
And it was this act of civil disobedience and then thus turning themselves in that made it a really powerful and important thing. Another character that's real, that isn't in the book proper, but is referenced quite a bit, is Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Can you talk about who Dietrich Bonhoeffer was and why he is an important pivotal piece throughout the course of the novel?
Yeah, my main character, Ray Kelleher, is a bookworm. You know, she's constantly soaking up information. So she's reading the work of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who's kind of a pacifist German theologian who makes the decision to join a failed plot to assassinate Hitler, and is executed for that. And in a way, Ray feels that we are in a Bonhoeffer moment in terms of the fight to defend the Earth, that we're up against powerful fossil fuel corporations and others, and she feels at the end of her life called to engage in a shocking act, which is not a spoiler alert. That's really
It does happen in the first chapter.
Happens in the first
that's how the book
chapter.
begins. So Ray takes the life, and her own life. She's terminally ill. She's facing the end of life, months to live. She decides to take out the CEO of a fossil fuel company. So this is the shocking beginning. The story is really like what shaped her and what impact did that have.
Right.
We're speaking with Chuck Collins, who is the author of a new quote-unquote novel, Alter to an Erupting Sun. I really think it's historical fiction in a lot of ways, but this point, the Bonhoeffer point, the activism versus terrorism sort of point is a through line throughout the whole novel. And so many of the people that you reference that are true in the novel would consider themselves pacifists. Wally Nelson, who with his wife Juanita lived on Woolman Hill in Deerfield, was opposing World War II. He went to jail because he would not be a part of fighting in any way or in any capacity, even in the United States, during World War II. So where do you come out when you're wrestling with this issue in fiction in regards to by any means necessary, as some say?
Yeah, I think that part of this is a fictional exploration because I've heard primarily women of a certain age say, you know, if I was terminally ill, I would risk it all, or I would take this bold action. Or even yesterday, walking in the woods, I was with a 70-year-old woman who's with a group of all these children, and she says, if I encounter a bear, I'm going to go straight to the bear. I'm going to save the children. There's sort of this powerful desire to protect ourselves and our children and the planet. So in this case, Ray is formed by these deep, Wally and Juanita Nelson, deep pacifist understandings, but she's kind of brought to the brink by the current moment we're in, this facing the impossible news of ecological disruption and destruction. So she's moved. You know, where I stand is I think it's not a good idea. I don't think people should kill each other. I think, but it's a shocking act, in a sense, to get us all to think, well, what does bold action look like in this moment? What am I called to do to save our one and only planet Earth?
It's not just climate issues in the book, though. It's humanitarian issues, and then the combination or the meeting of both of those. One of the important points earlier on, without revealing too much, is that Ray, your main character, goes to Nicaragua and ends up being basically being a shield early on. And it's interesting that there's a shift between using her life as shield and using her death as shield as this book goes along. Can you talk about how or why? I don't know why we should talk about why those two things connect, because clearly they have to connect. We're all humans and we experience the climate. So those issues should be related. But it's interesting the journey that she goes through, because I don't think anywhere else she goes that deep into humanitarian issues. It ends up being more climate, like more environmental, as opposed to direct personal conflicts.
You know, I think there were a lot of people from 413 who during the 1980s went to Central America. They went to Nicaragua to, you know, pick coffee or cotton or stand against U.S. invasion. They went to El Salvador, and they were formed by that. And you're right. This is so important in Ray Kelleher, my fictional Ray Kelleher, her character. She doesn't spend a lot of time in Central America, but it gives her a global picture. It gives her kind of an understanding of U.S. foreign policy, colonialism, and where the U.S. kind of fits into the global consumption picture. And that really sticks with her. And so, and I like what you said, Khalees. This is not a book about climate. It's looking at the intersection of human rights, inequality, racism, and climate disruption. These are all the things that Ray Kelleher, my character, thinks about and is formed by. Her elders really led her down that path.
And while Ray Kelleher is fictional, although there are a couple people that I was wondering if they're based on largely, a lot of the people that she encounters at the Montague Farm or at Woolman Hill are not fictional, and they really lived this for decades. As we mentioned, Wally Nelson was an anti-war protester for World War I because he was so committed to nonviolence and non-cooperation. They were also involved in the civil rights struggle and were guiding lights in some ways to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and helping him connect the dots between civil rights and racism and anti-war. Are you familiar with that kind of connection between them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thread, and Ray, actually personally, I got to live down the road from Wally and Juanita Nelson. I picked a lot of vegetables and hung out at their kitchen table. They really were personally helpful to me in sort of understanding wealth and power and everything. So that they were, they were early. If you go to the Civil Rights Museum in Memphis and you walk right into the Lorraine Hotel lobby, there's a picture of Wally Nelson holding a suitcase getting on one of the Freedom Rides. So that's the thread that's a thread to the connection to here to 413.
And Juanita Nelson outlived Wally. I never got to know Wally, but Juanita lived on Woolman Hill. My kids were lucky enough to go up there and help her pump water from her well. She lived completely off the grid. It's all connected to the Trap Rock Peace Center that's connected with the Woolman Hill. And in your book, which is technically a novel, there is a poem by Juanita Nelson about being and living off the grid. And I have excerpts of that poem that I got a chance to record with her before she passed away. Can you play Juanita 1, Betsy?
Well, I went out to the country to live a simple life, get away from all that concrete and avoid some of that strife, get off the backs of poor folks, stop supporting Uncle Sam and all that stuff he's putting down like bombing Vietnam. Oh, but it ain't easy, especially on a chilly night, when I beat it to the outhouse with my trusty dim flashlight. The seat is absolutely frigid, not a BTU of heat. That's when I think the simple life is not for us elite. 'Cause let me tell you something, though it may not be good news. If some folks win, you better know somebody's got to lose. So I guess I'll have to cast my lot with those who are opting out, and even though on freezing nights I will have my nagging doubts, long as I talk the line I do and spout my way out views, I'll keep on using the outhouse and singing the outhouse blues.
That is the voice of Juanita Nelson reading one of the poems she wrote, which is quoted in the new book, Altar to the Erupting Sun, by Chuck Collins. Juanita, in addition, she is the founder of the Greenfield Farmers Market, which was one of the first farmers markets in the area, founder of the Indoor Farmers Market. In the wintertime, she's founder of the Free Harvest Supper, and you can hear from even the poem, she's connected all these dots.
Nope, she's an important elder. And actually, we're celebrating her 100th birthday, August 17th to the 20th at Woolman Hill. We're going to have a 100th birthday party, a little conference symposium on Juanita. But yeah, I love that line. Not a BTU of heat in that toilet seat. Anybody who's used an outhouse knows exactly what she's talking about. Makes you question your commitment.
I remember my oldest son, Atticus, who's now 18 and a half, he said, we got to get Grandma Nita a sink, thinking that it wasn't the pumping and the well that was causing the water. If we only just got her a sink, then she'd be able to have running water in her house. But these are the kind of people that you're chronicling in this fiction, but it's historical fiction. It goes forward into the future, too. And we'll go forward into the future, into a break, and we'll talk a little bit about your past, Chuck, because I think your story is fascinating, too. Chuck Collins will be at the Odyssey in South Hadley tomorrow talking about his book, Altar to an Erupting Sun.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on NEPM. Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. We are here with author and activist Chuck Collins and his new book, Altar to an Erupting Sun. Chuck's going to be at the Odyssey Bookshop in South Hadley tomorrow night, July 10th at 7 p.m., but his life is just as fascinating as the book, so we're going to ask him about that now.
And Chuck, some of the people you talk about in the book were inspirational for you making this decision, but you were the heir to the Oscar Mayer Wiener fortune.
No baloney.
Does it come with a Wienermobile?
Oh,
You got to look out your window, man. It's parked in the back.
Oh, my word!
Wait,
No.
are you the one who gives so I've seen the listing for the job posting because when you get to drive the Wienermobile, you get to drive it for a year. And
It's kind of awesome.
It is kind of awesome.
How could you give that up, Chuck?
I know. Those are called the hot doggers. Yeah.
Are they?
I guess I couldn't through nepotism get the job.
Oh.
Yeah.
Did they give you a weenie whistle at least?
I have a lifetime supply of those.
Okay, good.
Man, that's like...
Tell us about your decision, though, to walk away from this huge fortune and what you've done with it. Because you've chronicled it in all this book. I'm not prying into your private life.
No. All's fair. Actually, the connection to Juanita Nelson is really interesting because Juanita is somebody I went to and said, look, I have this inheritance. I have this inherited wealth. I'm from the Oscar Mayer family. One of her great lines was, well, it's not a terminal condition. You can do something about that. It's not like whiteness. You're white. But with wealth, you could say, well, you can give that away.
Yeah.
She actually, and she wasn't saying that in a cavalier way. She was saying, you really care about justice. One of her ideas of nonviolence was, you want to live in a better world. You don't want to have war. Start looking at your own life and take your boot off of other people. I don't know. That's the kind of way she was part of that. So when I learned that I could get control over the money, I gave it away to a number of foundations. It was much less risky than moral and ethical decisions that a lot of other people make in the world, to not work in a weapons manufacturing company or stop working at a gun manufacturer. Whatever. People take greater risks. It did launch me on my way. It sort of opened up the next door and next chapter of my life. And I don't have any regrets about it. My kids might, but
And what some of those next chapters include is being very critical of hyperwealth. The Wealth Hoarders, How Billionaires Pay Millions to Hide Trillions is a book that you've written, and you have talked with other millionaires about why this is not a great direction to continue going in this country and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, partly leveraging, I guess, the privilege of winning the lottery at birth, I have understand the system of how the ultra-rich hire these professionals to hide their money. So I wrote a book about that, and a lot of them are coming out of the woodwork and becoming whistleblowers and talking about the trillions of dollars that are being hidden trusts in South Dakota and Nevada. So, yeah, I'm interested in disrupting this system of concentrated wealth and power, which is, really wrecking our society.
Doing so, what was working with Bill Gates Sr. like in that case? Because that seems like an interesting parallel.
Yeah, that was just a lucky stumble. I was working on an effort to try to keep the inheritance tax, the estate tax, from being abolished. And I got a call from Bill Gates just saying, Bill Gates Sr., the father of the founder of Microsoft, saying, how can I help your effort? I'm totally with you. And I'm like, oh, stay cool. I got a few ideas. So anyway, yeah. So he was true to his word. He and I campaigned, met with senators, wrote articles, wrote a book defending taxes on big inheritances. Not on, we're talking about people with tens of millions of dollars should pay an inheritance tax. So he's a wonderful guy.
What does Bill Gates Jr. think about his dad working with you on this sort of thing?
He was very supportive. It's not his thing. He's a little more geeky and techno, but Bill Gates Sr. was like Mr. Civic. He was like, if you're this lucky, you have this wealth, you should pay a tax so that it's an economic opportunity recycling program. So somebody else that didn't have the opportunity you have should have the same opportunity.
Which is interesting because a lot of the ultra wealthy, including Bill Gates, want to do things like Davos, where they're going to say, we as the rich are going to make decisions for the world for the better. And some of those have been great. But there's no democratic governance over those sort of things.
I mean, if it's decisions about what you're going to do with your money to make the world better, then sure, because it's your money and you should be giving it to make the world better. But if we're talking about actual ruling, that there are words for that in political science.
Well, actually, even philanthropy, we, the taxpayers, chip in a huge amount of lost tax revenue to give these billionaires the private power to make decisions over their money. Frankly, I'd rather tax the billionaires so that we can, as a society, democratically decide how to invest those funds. That's my view.
We're speaking with Chuck Collins, who in his day job is the director of the program on inequality and the common good, but also has a book out called Altar to an Erupting Sun. It's fiction. It goes forward into the future, but it also really, I think, in a way that if you love the activist nature of large parts of Western Mass, most of it in the last 100 years at least is chronicled in this book.
It's kind of a love letter to it.
I think so, too. One of the things that both the Nelsons, Wally and Juanita, and Randy Keeler, who shows up in this book, do is war tax resist. Is there a counter to the ultra-rich paying their fair share versus breaking the law by not paying your taxes? Randy Keeler, was the threat of losing his house for not paying taxes because he was trying to do it to resist war. Is there a parallel between those two things?
There is. I mean, I think that we have this problem, which is because of the power of the military-industrial complex, they've kind of warped our political system. So much of our tax dollars go to weapons. At the same time, I think we should have a tax system where the ultra-wealthy pay their fair share and that we have a better democratic oversight of how those tax dollars are used. So to me, there's a connection. We have to deal with the power of the military, and we have to have a fair tax system. One of the things that's connected to my novel is the power of the fossil fuel industry is part of this concentrated power. They use their wealth and power to block the alternatives. We all think, we're all responsible for climate change, right? Particularly if you live in the northern hemisphere, middle class, affluent classes. But the reality is this fossil fuel industry has locked us on to this collision course. And that's part of the challenge.
In
this moment,
to shifting the focus from them onto us so that we feel more responsible for taking care of it when we in fact have not nearly as much impact as we are being led to believe. But the last question I want to ask you is, where are the good swimming holes in Western Mass?
Oh, I'm not going to tell you. I'll personally whisper to you. But I live off the Green River. We got 6. There's the West River. Western Mass, of course, there's a couple. I wouldn't go out today.
Yes.
I just drove down
there's
there.
Flooding. Be careful.
Oh my
out
God,
there.
it's like black churning, brown.
Always
earth.
wait till 24 hours after a large storm to go into
Say
the river.
48 today.
Yeah, 48.
48 after this one, yeah. But yeah, there's some great swimming holes up there.
My last question for you, Chuck Collins. You'll be at the Odyssey tomorrow with Altar to an Erupting Sun, a novel. Why do this as a novel? Why go into the future with it? Why not just tell the activist history of Western Mass?
I find, for me, novels are like a gateway to wanting to learn history. So historical fiction gets me interested in the real history, learning more. And then there's this tradition, Ursula Le Guin and Octavia Butler. We have to think about how we're going to survive the next 10 years, how humanity's going to turn the corner. That's an act of fiction right now. But in my case, it's not a zombie fiction it's not dystopian. It's like, here's Western Mass, 413, Southern Vermont, starts to turn the corner toward a more sustainable community and response. So that's part of the vision. So fiction is an opportunity to open up and offer visions.
Chuck Collins, author, activist, who'll be at the Odyssey Bookshop in South Hadley tomorrow with his book, Altar to an Erupting Sun. Thank you so much for joining us, Chuck.
Thank you, Khalees. Thank you, Monty. Lovely being with you.
Tuesday on the Fabulous 413, the shift in how we consume music is an interesting tale.
One that gets told in John Dugan's new book, The Life, Death, and Afterlife of the Record Store, A Global History. We'll chat with the author and take him to one of our local record stores, Platypus Records in East Hampton.
How we consume language is neat, too. We'll discover the evolution of speaking accents in Chicopee with budding linguist Ren Wood.
Our director is Tony. We want the names done.
Our engineer is Betsy's shiny new smaller carbon footprint Lenkto.
She's got an electric car. Our technical team is Bart, Printer Woes Rankin, Kara, Kidnapped by Naptown Foster, and Punk Rude Boy Dubé.
Thanks to Spouse, Happy Valley Guitar Orchestra, G.E. Smith and the Saturday Night Live Band, Barry McGuire, Bruce Coburn, Gil Scott Heron, and Brian Jackson, the Pixies, Star Trek, Bjork, and Aaron McKeown. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. We'll see you tomorrow. and the fabulous 413.